All right, young scholars, today our task is going to be to produce a new app where we're going to convert from pounds to kilograms and vice versa. So go ahead and create a new project. By default, it should always say phone and tablet. We're going to select empty activity. Let's call our new app Medical Calc. And then for the minimum SDK, go ahead and select whatever the lowest minimum SDK you have available. For me, it's API 21, Lollipop. So create a new app called Medical Calc with the lowest possible minimum SDK that you can create. And as always, our project begins to build. And once it's finished, we see all of our files on the left-hand side. So there are four major steps we have to focus on in order to create this app. We have to make some small modifications to our build Gradle. We have to add in information to our strings.xml. We have to set up our layout using our activity_main. And then we have to change our main activity code in order to complete everything. So once you've created your new app called Medical Calc, and it's built on the left-hand side, make sure that you open up the res folder, the values folder, so we can see the strings file, the Gradle scripts, so we could see our build Gradle for the module app we need to edit, and the Java folder for the main activity file that we need to edit. So the first thing we need to do is open up our build Gradle for the module app. And you'll notice here we have a compile SDK and a target SDK that say 33. In order for us to run our program that we need to in creating this app, we have to bump those both up from 33 to 34. So the target SDK and the compile SDK have to be changed from 33 to 34. Then we have to add 3 additional implementations. Implementations, as I mentioned, is similar to import when you're doing programming. So we're going to import Android X app compat app compat 1.4.2. That is the version of app compat that we're going to be utilizing. Then we're going to implement com.google.android.material material 1.6.1. And lastly, we're going to implement Android X constraint layout constraint layout 2.1.4. And these 3 new implementations provide us with the version of app compat materials and constraint layouts that we're going to use within this app. So all of that goes within the build Gradle module app. These 3 new implementations and changing the compile SDK and the target SDK from 33 to 34. So next, we have to set up our strings file. Right now, all we have is the string name of our app name. Yes. So within this build Gradle module app, down at the bottom, it has a section called dependencies. Within that is the implementations. Those are, like I said, similar to the imports you would use in Java programming. And we need to add these 3 specific implementations: app compat version 1.4.2, material version 1.6.1, and constraint layout version 2.1.4 that we're going to utilize within our app. And again, you also have to change the compile SDK and the target SDK from 33 to 34 in order for our program or app to hopefully load when we build and run it later on today. So now we need to edit our strings.xml file, which is always in the values folder within the res or resource folder. So right now, all we have is the string name of our app, which is just medical calc. but we want to add strings for our display. So first, we're going to create a string name called TV title. That's going to say convert patient wait, because that is what the app is going to do. Allow us to convert from pounds to kilograms and vice versa. Then we're going to create a string called hint. This string will simply say weight of patient.
Professor,
Yes,
I just had a question. How come we're using the string name TV title?
that is going to be like at the top of the TV, the display. So right below where it will say medical calc, it'll have that display, convert patient weight. So that's going to be your biggest header, if you will, on the preview.
Oh, okay.
And the string name, when it is a hint, it's basically, that's where you're going to type something. So it basically gives you a hint of, hey, this is what you need to input here. Now, the remainder of the string names are just because of what they are. So, for example, this string name will be RLB kilo. So that is going to be our conversion of pounds to kilograms. And similarly, it should be RB for radio button. Similarly, it'll be RB kilo to LB. That one is going to do the opposite. Convert kilograms to pounds. And then lastly, we're going to create the string name for our PT convert, which is our button that is going to convert from one weight to the other. And after we name them this, we're going to use them within our main activity file to refer back to them. So our app name is what's going to show up right at the top of the app, assuming it builds and runs. And the TV title is the big display right below it that tells us what it is. The hint will show weight of patient, where we're going to input the patient's weight. The radio button for pounds to kilos will say convert pounds to kilograms. The radio button for kilos to pounds will say convert kilograms to pounds. And then we'll have a button that will say convert weight. As you've seen in other projects we've built, you'll notice that we need to create our layout folder within our res folder in order to create our activity underscore main dot XML file. So once you're done with all of your strings, you'll right click on the res folder, select new directory, and call it layout. So this way we now have a layout folder within the res folder in order to put our activity underscore main dot XML file, which, as you've seen in the past, basically sets up our layout, our view of what we see in the emulator. So in order to create that new file, you would right click layout, new file, activity underscore main dot XML. And you would switch over to code. But I'll go back into the strings.xml file just to make sure that everybody has this set up. Because without all of these strings set up, when we try to utilize these strings within activity main and main activity, we're going to have issues. Everything needs to match up. So once you have all of those strings set up within our activity main file, we set up our view. So the first thing we have to do is set our version and encoding. So it's less than question mark XML, version equals 1.0, encoding equals UTF minus 8. That establishes what version of XML we're reusing, as well as how the text is viewed. We're then going to use that constraint layout package that we implemented back in our build Gradle. So Android X dot constraint layout dot widget dot constraint layout. And then when you type in XMLNS, it gives you 3 options to choose from. you're going to want to select this first option. Android equals schemas.android.com/apk/res/Android. Double click that, it imports it for you. Then on the next line, you're going to do that XMLNS app. Double click that, it populates in for you. And then lastly, you will select that third option of the tools, double click that, and that populates in for you. So each time you type in XMLNS, you choose the first option, double click, the second option, double click, the third option. As you go through, it removes the ones that you've utilized. Then we're going to set up our layout width and height to simply match parents. Whatever the height and width is already set up within the app, we're just going to use that. But then for our margin, we're going to have it be 15 display pixels. Then we're going to do tools, context equals within quotes, dot main activity. And then close out. But enter down that Android X constraint layout widget constraint layout. That is going to be at the entire end of our activity underscore main file. So this now calls on everything that's going to happen within our main activity file in order to produce our app. So first, we're going to create a text view. And we're going to immediately add into that text view that TV title. That string that we built called convert patient weight. That's the first thing that's going to be visible within the app. We're then going to set a width and height that's going to wrap content. Basically, if it's too big to fit on one line, we'll drop it down to the second line to help us. We'll set that same top margin as we did above, to be 15 display pixels. So we've set up the first text view to be that string TV title. We have to add the text for it. So Android : text equals at string / TV title, which now inputs that string that we produced in our strings.xml file. This convert patiently has now been passed into the display. So now we'll set it as a color for the text. Hashtag FF0000, which is a hexadecimal number for the color red. Then we're going to set the text size as 30 SP. This way, our text size for that TV title is going to be the biggest that we have of any text within this view. So now we set our layout constraints. So the first one is going to be with the bottom, and we simply set it to parent. We then do the same for the constraint layout of the end. Tie that to our parent. Whatever is already established makes it easy for everything. Then we set our horizontal constraints. In this instance, we'll assign it a number, 0.498, which will constrain how high our text can be, even if it needs to be wrapped. Then, since we have a constraint for our ends, we have to set one for our start, and we set that to parent as well. And similarly, since we have a layout constraint for the bottom, we have to set one for the top as well. Everything matches. Bottom, top, end, start. Horizontal. So what do you think we'll have that matches horizontal? Vertical. We have to create our last constraint of vertical. So again, we have to assign that a number, So in this case, we will assign it 0.22. And then you would close out your text view by doing the slash and greater thans. So that has simply created the text view for that TV title. That big string at the top of our viewing window. Next, we have to do edit text. Where we're now going to give an ID TV weight. To make things easier for ourselves, you can go ahead and copy that Android layout width, Android layout height, and Android layout margin from the top from the earlier section, copy and paste it into our edit text section. Because we're going to use them again. But then we're going to use Android EMS 10. Because this is our hint, it's going to fade in the background, so to speak. Next, we're going to use foreground gravity. If you remember previously, you've seen that there are foregrounds and backgrounds for these different displays based on how they look. As I mentioned, the foreground is what's right in front of you. The background is what's behind you. So I gave you this example with this Zoom video. I'm in the foreground, I'm in the front, and then the fake beach behind me, that would be the background. So we're going to horizontally center all of our text. Then we do Android gravity and do the same thing. Center underscore horizontal to center all of our text horizontally. And then we import our string, just as we did here above with the TV title. We now do the same for our hint. So it's going to be Android hint equals @string/hint, which now passes whatever we have set up as hint within our strings.xml file. But since obviously a weight is going to be a number, we have to tell Android Studio, the app, that that's what we're going to expect. So Android input type equals number. Then we're going to set the text color for the hint as hashtag 78909C, which gives us kind of a grayer color. As I mentioned, the idea is we want the hint to hide in the background. And then we'll set the text size to be 25 SP. You always want it to be smaller than whatever your TV title or biggest part of the screen displays. So then we have to do all of this again as well. Our app layout constraints. So go ahead and copy that from the text view section and paste it into the edit text section. You want to make your horizontal constraint a little smaller. So we'll just drop this down from 0.498 to 0.497 in order to make it a little smaller than our TV title. But vertically, you want to make it a little bigger. So I've changed it to 0.331. The reason is your title you want smack dab in the center of your viewing screen. Whereas your hint and the rest of your text, you don't really care. It can go all the way across the screen. It's not necessarily the focal point of your viewing window. And then lastly, we will do Android : autofill hints equals quote, quote, then slash greater than sign to close out that edit text section. So what that is now doing is where it wants you to type in a number for the weight, it will populate that hint, which says weight of patient. So hopefully the user now understands, oh, I have to input a number, whatever the weight of the patient is. Next, we create another text view. This is going to pass the result. Allow somebody to type in the weight. So we'll set an ID and call this TV result. We can again copy the Android layout, width and height of wrap content from above, and drop it here. Since this is going to match with our hint, we can also copy that text size. However, we want to set a constraint on our top of the margin. So we'll set that as 25 SP as well. This way, it only shows that text in that box, in that window. Then again, we're going to copy all of our layout constraints and paste them there. In this instance, we could set our horizontal bias back to what we had earlier, but our vertical, we want it to be much bigger. So this way, our hint is only about half of the size of that text. So it'll have a giant box for the user to input their number, their weight. So we've now created a viewing window which allows the individuals to see convert patient weight and input their weight. Now we're going to create the radio group, which creates two radio buttons that allow us to switch back and forth from pounds to kilograms or kilograms to pounds. So as you would imagine, since we have this set up as text view, when you're building a radio group, it's just radio. So first we create an ID. In this instance, we're just going to call it RG weight for radio group for the weight. So we're going to set up a width of 300 display pixels. And a height of 100 display pixels. This way, it does not necessarily take up all of the space. Then we're going to copy our app constraints from above and paste them there. However, we don't need to worry about the vertical, so we delete that. And we don't need to worry about the horizontal, so we delete those. The radio group is merely just going to have the two radio buttons we're going to set up. So we close that radio group. And drop it down. So only the greater than sign is there. The radio group should be below it because we have to include our two radio buttons. The two radio buttons are these options here. We could choose to either convert from pounds to kilograms or convert from kilograms to pounds. So just like you had radio group, you now have radio button. So it doesn't necessarily matter which order of the buttons you choose to put in. but I'm going to create the radio button pounds to kilos first. So for our layout width, we're just going to match the parent. Whatever's already set up, that's what we use. And for the layout height, we're going to wrap content. If it can't fit all on one line, all right, automatically drop it down to the second line to make it look nice. Then we're going to use this Android : checked equals true. What that is going to do is automatically say that, okay, this first option is selected. So by default, that will be the selection. So then we need to pass the text from that string that we created, called radio button LB to kilo, from back here in strings.xml. And then last but not least, we'll set the text size to be 20 SP. Then we have to close that radio button with the slash and then greater than. But since we created the radio button for pounds to kilos, we now have to do the opposite. So we can just copy that whole section from the radio button and paste it. However, we have to change RB kilo to pound. And similarly, for the text that we're passing through, RB for radio button, kilo to pound. So again, you can merely copy this code, paste it, and then change your ID and string to match the other example. So RB kilo to pound. And because I have it set as lowercase here, I have to have it lowercase here as well. And those two radio buttons now end our radio group. So we're almost done with our activity main. We now have to utilize or create our button that will allow us to convert the weights back and forth. So we now create a section button. With our ID, BT convert, just like we called it in strings. In this instance, our width and height, we're just going to wrap content. If it doesn't fit on one line, just push it off onto the next line. Then we're going to set a margin from the top, 15 display pixels. Then we'll set a background tint. And we'll set it to be red. Just as we did with our TV title. Ideally, we want to have our button be centered in the middle of the screen to make it easily viewable. And then just as we've done in our other instances, we have to pass through the string that we've set up in our strings.xml file. Then we'll set our text size. So that'll be 25 SP. Then we'll scroll back up and copy our app layout constraints again. And paste them. However, we don't need our horizontal. Based on how we have this structured, it's automatically going to show up beneath everything else. However, we'll set our vertical a little smaller to 659 because we don't necessarily need it stretching all the way across the screen. And then lastly, we close out our button with that slash and greater than sign. Now, last but not least, we have to create a view that will show the answer, the result. What is the conversion if we put in 85 pounds? What is the conversion between pounds to kilograms? So we set up a text view. And we create an ID called TV result. Again, we'll set up our width and height to simply wrap content. We'll create a margin from the top of 25 display pixels. We'll set the text color to be red, just to make it easy, because that's what we've been using. We'll set the size to be 25 SP. And then we need to copy those constraints again. So we scroll up and copy all of the constraints. And we're going to use all of them. We can keep them exactly as they are. Parent, parent, 0.498, parent, parent, 796. However, the last thing we need to do is tools, ignore, equals, duplicate LDS. And then we close out our text view with the slash and greater than symbol. So what the duplicate LDS does is if there's anything that's duplicated or the same, it's ignored. So if you put in 75 pounds and you want to convert it to kilograms, and then you do it again, it's going to ignore it. So that now sets up our view. When we run our emulator, hopefully it works. That will basically be what's called upon to display and view everything. So now we need to edit the main activity file in order to calculate all that for us. We don't know off the top of our head how the specific calculations work. So we need to set them up in our main activity. So we have all these imports here. The only one that we're actually going to use that's listed is this import android.os.bundle. So we can go ahead and delete all of those. And we might as well delete everything else as well. But we need to add some imports. So import android.widget.button allows us to create a button. Import android.widget.edit text allows us to pass the text from the strings as we need. Import android.widget.radio button allows us to create a radio button. Import android.widget.text view allows us to display those views we've set up in the activity file. Import android.widget.toast allows us to communicate. That passes that hint onto the user. Okay, you need to enter a weight here. Then import Android X app compact app compact activity. And then last but not least, import java.text.decimal format, which allows us to convert from whole numbers to full numbers as needed. So now we have to create a class that's in essence going to convert from one to the other. So class and activity, because that's what our class is called. Colon, app, compact, activity with no passing parameters. And then our brackets to start our class. So we're going to set up a variable called conversion rate equal to 2.2. We're going to set a variable called weight entered, which we're going to set up as 0.0 by default. Then a variable converted weight equals 0.0 by default. In essence, because no number has been entered yet, it's assumed it's 0. So then we have to create a method. Protected override function on create saved instance state colon bundle question mark. The bundle question mark sets it up such that there would be no errors or no issues. So we're going to inherit from the superclass on create whatever that saved instance state happens to be. Then we're going to set up our view. So set content view r.layout.activity main, which now implements that view that we've set up in the activity underscore main file. Next, we're going to use the call get support action bar. The question mark afterward, again, allows us to have any kind of incident. It prevents any problems passing through our parameters. So we do dot set display show home enabled. Which allows us to set the display We then do the same for any potential logo that we might have. So if there is a logo set within this MIP map folder, IC launcher, we would utilize that. So in this instance, it's just using the default Android logo. Then we're going to set the display to use that logo. Then we're going to create a value or variable called weight. Which allows us to accept whatever weight was put in by the user. So it's val weight equals find view by ID r.id.tv weight as edit text, which allows us to pass that variable that we set up in our activity main when the user enters it. Then we set up a value LB to kilo, which is going to call that radio button that we set up. And then we do the same for kilo to LB. But remember that your names have to match what you've set up. So remember, I had mine as kilo to the T was lowercase. And then lastly, we set up a result value, which is going to use that TV result that we created in our activity main. And that will be as text view. It's just going to display that result out that we've created. We have to set a value convert. It's going to do the conversion for us. So that will call on that button that we created, BT convert, and that will be as button. So now we have to create what the button does. So if any of you have used JavaScript before, it's called an on-click. When that button is created, a click, it's going to trigger the conversion. So we do convert dot set on click listener. Weight entered equals weight dot text dot to string dot to double. So whatever is entered is now going to be converted from a string to a double. We then create a value called tenth that's going to format our number for us. So val tenth equals decimal format inside parentheses, quote, number sign, dot, number sign. So this way, it's a double with one decimal point. So then we create an if-else statement. If LB to kilo radio button is checked, and if the weight entered is less than or equal to 500, then the converted weight equals the weight entered divided by the conversion rate. And then display out the result of the converted weight plus the text kilograms. But if you're having an if-else statement, after your if, you need an else. So within the else, we'll have toast dot make text this at main activity, comma, then within quotes, pounds must be less than 500. Then a comma after that, toast dot length underscore long. Actually, this is all inside parentheses here. And then after that closing parentheses, dot show parenthesis. And a closing bracket to close the else statement. But then we have to do the same thing for our kilograms. So if kilo to pound dot is checked, We also have to see if the weight entered is less than or equal to 225. If it is, we do converted weight equals weight entered times the conversion rate. And then result text equals tenth format converted weight. Make sure you spell it right. Yep. Plus the word pounds. Obviously, you should have a space before the word pounds and the word kilograms to allow for room between the number and pounds. So then after your if, you create an else to match. And we do the same thing. Post that make text parentheses this at main activity comma and a display error. Kilos must be less than 225 comma post dot length underscore long. And then after your closing bracket, show parentheses. And then if everything lines up, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 closing brackets after all of this. So then finally, after all that work, we now sync our project together. And I already see one error I made because I spelt length wrong here. So I'm going to go in and fix that. I spelled it right there. Okay. So then I'll file sync again. And in a perfect world, I'm going to run this and it will run properly. Now, hopefully it comes up now. It's terminating the app. Starting to run, hopefully. And yes, it works for us, hopefully. Maybe. So this is what it should look like. That convert patient weight is our TV title here. The weight of patient is that hint. We have 2 radio buttons. Convert pounds to kilograms, convert kilograms to pound, and our convert weight button. Everything matches what we've set up in our strings.xml. So you would type in a weight in accordance with the rules that we've set here within our main activity. So pounds has to be less than 500 and kilos has to be less than 225 when you put in. So as long as our pounds are less than 500 and we select our button to convert weight, it should give us an answer. So 450 pounds is 204.5 kilograms. But if we put in 500, and convert weight, it should give us an error message. But for some reason it's not. So let's try 550. Yep, so we have an error message there. Pounds must be less than 500. So hopefully that loaded and worked on yours as well. And that's all I have planned for today. Make sure that if you did not catch up or follow along with me, that you go back and watch the video as you need to. But remember that due on Sunday is app number 2, where you're modifying the affirmations app we did a couple of weeks ago. Like I said, if you can't get the program to load, instead of submitting a screenshot, just go into Microsoft Paint and type in whatever your top fact is and put a picture below it. So if there are no questions, I bid all of you adieu, and I will see you on Monday.
Okay, see you on Monday. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Thank you.